So I am absolutely delighted today to have as my guest Anna Twinney. And not only is she um, not only is she an equine specialist and natural horsemanship clinician, she's also an animal communicator and Reiki master. And she also has a new live film that's going to be available for you to be involved with on February 15th. And
Okay.
I definitely wanted to talk to her about that because it's Whispers from the Wild Ones. And so thank you so much, Anna, for being on. And I was just, when I first heard about you, I was so interested that you had observed wild horses in the wild and that informed your work with horses and people. And so please just tell me something about that.
And what I love too, Carol, is the fact that we both share this passion of the wild horses. And that very passion and calling has brought me all over the United States and Mongolia, Australia, etc. And what I've really appreciated about everything is when you hear that the horse's language is universal, it's lovely to know that until you're put into a situation where it goes to the test. And that's the truth of it. In Mongolia, I was in a 10-foot solid round pen where the Mongolians wanted to see the work so that they wouldn't have to bulldog these little wild horses down and choke them down. So I'm in a solid wall, and then I'm looking at it going, really, please God, it was that, please God, hopefully he hasn't been abused, so he looks at me like he would anybody else and want to hurt me. And then I had a translator there, and they're looking at me going, you've got 1 hour to hold to this horse. And the art for me would be to stay centered, right? To stay centered, to go, okay, I'm under this quantity of pressure, but at the same time, let's be true to ourselves and be true to the horse. So I would not do anything I wouldn't do at home. I wanted to stay aligned with what I'd be doing at home, which is conversing with them. And to see this little fella's eye, which is incredibly beautiful, window to the soul. They're the same as our wild horses. And to not let them down or not push him beyond what he's capable of doing and still bringing him forward. I remember looking up to the audience, and they'd come from all over. And I said, we're not going to get him halted today, but if you could give me 1 more hour tomorrow, I'll be able to do this for you, but just hold tight. And they gave that 1 hour. And so for me, not only did I stay true and authentic, but it was the piece to realize it truly is universal. It's a universal language that expands far beyond the spoken words or the exactly that dialogue that the horses have in the wild. Every statement that's been given to me over the years, I like to look into myself. When I hear that it's predominantly a silent language, then I look at the body language. But if we corner ourselves into something so small to say all of their language is body language, we won't be able to see outside of that realm and that box to realize that there's so much more. When you ask me how it's influenced me over the years, it's probably who I've become because of them. That realization of the sensitivity of reading us upon approach, the realization that everything's in the eye, that they would look down as an acknowledgement that the nonverbal communication starts with getting somebody's attention. We can say thank you with our eyes, just like a human would nod. We can move forward and ask for that forward motion. They can see our intention. The list is so long by watching wild horses. I've said to a number of students that if only you watch, you'll never actually see, because you'll see only what you want to see, even in a wild horse herd. So, for example, if you state, like many clinicians have, the leader is dominant, so therefore it gives us the license to move their feet or chase them around because horses chase each other, then that's what you're going to see. You're not going to see that 9 out of 10 bands of horses are quiet, that the leader actually isn't dominant, that he leads through passive leadership, which would mean by coming inside out. You'll only see what you want to see, or you only see what's been told to you. So therefore, it's so important to get out into the wild and not sit there with a beknownst knowledge to come back with, well, they're doing this and they're doing that and they're licking and chewing and it's a sign of a release. Well, licking and chewing wouldn't be just a release. It might, in fact, state I'm a herbivore, and if I'm eating over here, I mean no harm to you. Or I'm a herbivore, and if I'm eating, it means you're not harming me. Or it could be asking, not just to release. I was teaching a lesson just yesterday with little Tennessee Walker, and she didn't want a pony and she didn't know how to pony. So she got her mate from the pasture with her that was being ponied, and she's looking back at him going, why are you still here? And her ears are pinned going, go away, why are you following me? And then we're reassuring her to go, this is okay. He can be by you. And he's so relaxed. And she'd lick and chew, not because there was a release. There's no release there. She licked and chewed to go, you sure I'm okay? So therefore, if all we do is look through a certain lens, then all we see is they lick and chew when you release. And that's the big thing, is to be able to sit in these pastures, sit in these herd management areas, somewhat with your knowledge, because you can enjoy that and see what's happening with these herds, but also with a complete open mind. And that's what I've always loved, is the freedom of expression and the acknowledgement of what we think we've learned, and then have it happen, and the open mind to realize there's so much more with these wild horses. All of it transfers to the domestic, Carol, and you know this, I know, but it all transfers. And what it's done is, not only have I been in search of the whisper, but it's softened the methods and the techniques every year, even more so.
Wow.
Constantly winding it back, dialing it back to go, you know what, if I can talk to a horse from the comfort of my own home and change behavior, why am I schooling this horse? You know, there has to be another way. And I do believe there's the balance, right? There's the spiritual with the physical, there's the practical application and the esoteric. So there's this huge balance, but at the same time, refining. That's where they've helped.
Every time you go into to work with somebody with their horse, you're really going in open and wanting to listen to the horse. You're not going in to impose your will on the situation.
Right. And for me, the next piece would be the balance of the experience. I've found that over the years, the older I get, the less important it seems to others that you have experience. That's being very honest. I see many people advertising a position and they will have zero Mustang knowledge, and others don't care that there's no Mustang knowledge. And it's a huge piece. We value, if there's a dog trainer and a wolf trainer, we put less value on a domestic horse trainer versus a wild horse trainer. It's as though everybody can train horses. So therefore, horse is a horse. And we're all entitled to bring these wild horses into our life and become, let's quote it, tip trainers and otherwise. And that shingles enough, right? This is relevant because when you walk into that stall, your experience counts. You can't discount decades of experience. And yet the art is exactly what you state. I've got to read the horse with my decades of experience. So if somebody were to say, for example, you can't get in the stall and he's really, really aggressive, I have to take that on board. That's your perception and it's valid. And I'm going to read the horse with my experience to go, okay, there are signs or there's not. And now I've got to move it to one side and evaluate as I move forward, because blindly walking and to go, let's see what happens. Oops, he picked me up. Well, no. So I always tell people, I listen to your perspective because that's your perspective. Then I'm going to read the horse and then I'm going to sense the individual too. To go, let me feel into this. Because if you charge these rails, I'm feeling into, are you bluffing? Are you going to follow through with that? Are you trying to tell me that you're frightened of me? You know, what are you doing within this action? Which keeps it with your mind open, right? Otherwise, you have the closed-mindedness to go, well, you need to take a pitchfork in there. I wouldn't do that, but or you need to do this. No, we don't need to do any of that. We need to sit back, breathe, pause, observe, feel into the situation, and let them communicate and find that space within that we can actually work. So yes,
So,
got the reading.
and I imagine it's very different working with, say, a problem, what an owner considers a problem horse, to a horse that hasn't been touched before. So
Yeah.
how is that different?
It's been interesting over the years because the wild ones, we could state that they're clean slates. So it's an open canvas, and whatever action and response we have will be layered onto who they're going to become.
Mm.
In effect, anybody that's approaching is training that horse because they're training them to how we wish to develop that relationship and the foundation they need to be in this world. So every interaction is training to a degree, but of course we can layer that too, to go hanging out with somebody who's training, but hanging out is also just being. So there's different layers, but they're a clean slate, the wild ones. They're innocent and they need help to come into our world, versus the ones with the problems that are domestic. They came in as beautiful beings. And I always think that in the back of my mind too, that they entered this world as a foal, probably get teary-eyed, so enthusiastic to be alive, a sponge ready to take it in. And then the world brings them down, and how sad that is for every species that goes, welcome, I'm home and I get to do this experience, and this horse is misunderstood, their language misinterpreted. And the number out there would be 90% of horses have pain. And so often people like to associate pain with physical, and it's less understood and understandable that it could be emotional, mental, psychological. And therefore that horse who has a behavioral issue, we need to think far beyond the behavior to realize there's more to it. It's so interesting because it's very easy for individuals to label, to say, well, he's herd bound because he's trying to get back to the herd. And there's truth in it, and people understand that common language. And yet there's the other piece to go, actually, he's just lacking confidence, or he's lacking trust. Is he really herd bound because he's lacking confidence? I would want to label it differently, to state that it's the confidence, or it's the rider error, or he's not feeling like it today, truly, because who would? Because it's cold, wet, damp, and it doesn't make him herd bound. So we like to put in a category very quickly. And I like to change that, Carol. When somebody comes to me, I might say, well, that's your opinion, or that's your impression. What if we had this different impression? And that comes under labeling too, in general. When people say he is a biter, I'll quickly shift that to, no, he nibbles, or he might bite occasionally. He doesn't make him a biter, because if he's nibbling to say, pay attention to me, he's not a biter. If he's biting once to go, I'm bored here, he's not a biter. He's trying to communicate with you. And there's so many things, they only have their lips or hooves or head or body to communicate. And if they're not being heard, they have to raise it.
Well,
and it's always in the eye, or nearly always in the eye. And you can see if they're plotting and planning, because science says they can't plot and plan and deceive, but you can see that eye to go, you're plotting something. You might be in the now, but you're plotting something, right? And so it'd be to redirect that thought pattern to say, I hear you, you're in discomfort emotionally, you feel like you need to get home and I'm standing in the way, so you're planning to take me out. Well, let's all regroup, breathe, readdress it, but not reprimand necessarily, right? There might be a correction, but not get to this dominant space that I'm going to circle you 5-10 minutes so that you never do this again. Well, now we've taken away the voice. And now they become servants or prisoners, or and so on, or things and items and commodities, right?
I was wondering too, there's considerable trauma that these horses go through, the wild ones, when they're rounded up. What have you observed about that and how it affects how they're able to be integrated into our world?
Yeah. And I do believe you would have seen probably different and equal amount of trauma there. And in the joy, I say for us veterans that have been in this a long time, there's 25 years under my belt. And I would have hoped for more change in 25 years, more positive change. And honestly, I had to tell you that at some point last year, it imploded a bit on that because it wasn't fresh and new where you come in to go, I can make change and I have the full faith there's going to be change and I'm going to lead that charge. And last year was my point of breaking to go, I'm not seeing the results. I'm not seeing what I believed would happen. And there's these conspiracy theories, et cetera, but you look at it to go, we're not further along. We're not further along. And I wish we were, because with that, I think I've worked 1,500 Mustangs in my care, wild horses, feral horses, Mustangs in my care. So you've got a lot of numbers there. And some are so stressed that they will colic, not necessarily in a clinic, but you hear about it after the clinic or later that they didn't make it. They're going to do that when they can't transition into the new home because of the extremes, loss of family, loss of land, loss of lifestyle, even pigeonholed into something like, don't quote dressage horse, but it's that thing to go, you're trying to put them in a discipline that they can't handle. So I will see that. And I see everything. I've only had about a handful that have gone exceedingly aggressive or they came it. So what that means is they were in a pen and because they've been imprisoned, either in a holding pen or with us, they would go into extreme fight. So it would bring it out of them that you go, this one deserves to be free. This one has such a huge intention to save himself over anything else. There's danger involved. He deserves to stay out. Generally speaking, it would be flight and fight that you would see that they I'll tell you, the Nakota horses, while not BLM horses, can jump a 6-foot round pen panel from a standstill. And I've seen it 3 times that you go, shoot, you're standing there and you're gone. So of course they could leave if the pressure is too great. And the pressure could be the 4 walls. It doesn't have to be us entering. And then you've got the charge, the kick, the bite, the body slam. In an ideal world, fingers crossed, even on a clinic, while that we've sped it up a little bit, we're going at a speed that they can digest and understand. Here's a good way to say, if I had 10 pens, you'd probably have one pacing. You'd have one standing back and saying, if you don't see me, I don't see you. You probably have a depressed one. You've had 1 or 2 that are totally fine, easily adjusting. You'd have one that might kick out, act out, etc. So you get an array of individuals.
Well,
and probably about a third-ish would be ready to go and keen, excited, etc. And probably about 2/3, if not 3/4, would have a processing period.
well,
A processing period. Now, it's pretty quick on our clinics because we don't put them in chutes and they're not roped and they're not choked and we're not chasing the room around and we're not bribing or luring either. So we use their horse's language to ask certain activities like facing up. Look at the person that's talking to you. Look at them. Face your fear and watch. And it would be using the natural herd dynamics to say, I've studied that and let's bring this as close to your nature. So you could see it this way. There's their language, here's ours, and we're bridging the gap to meet them. And you could also see it this way. If there's their world and here's our world, and we're bridging the gap to meet them. So instead of yanking them and going, okay, we're going to do a totally different system and structure that you have no clue and you've got to figure out what this all means, we're utilizing the language to help them to say, I'm going to say thank you with my eyes. I'm going to draw with my eyes, just like your family does. And it's going to look a little strange because we're not horses, but you're going to lock on that we mean well because we're coming from a good place and we're setting them for us up for success. So again, it's not that I've never, honestly, hand on heart, I have never driven a horse in a round pen for gentling. I am so against it. I'm a firm believer it's not the way to go. I have enough experience to state it when people say, well, how many have you done? You don't need to. A wild horse will run for his life. He will run 3 days many times before he'll give up, give in, surrender, support, whatever word you want. So therefore, the way we gentle is always, can you face up? Can you face up? Can you watch? Can you track? And it's got a little bit of a reverse psychology on it, because it would be, when you track, we will leave. When you face, we'll leave. When you interact, we'll leave. When you engage, we'll leave.
Whoa.
And so what we're saying is, I'm watching you. I see you. When I see you relax, I'll always tell you I saw you. Sorry. So if they breathe strongly, we might say, I saw that relaxation. If they lower the head a bit, I saw that. And we do that by leaving the pen or pausing or going sideways, something so that they look at us to go, wow, you saw that and you saw that. And you're reinforcing, when you breathe and relax, things will slow down and stop. And that's ultimately the method or the methodology would be, I see you, I hear you, I support you. I don't know if that will answer the question. I kind of went places in my head on it, Carol.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. I wanted to make sure we had time for you to talk about the way of the equine warrior, your nonprofit,
Thank you.
and your vision behind that, and why you started it.
Why I started it. Well, come with me on this picture for a moment. So your expertise. I was a British Bobby, and in the British police force, in those days, 21 when I started, actually 18, but then 21 full time. And I realized that the victims were numbers. This is all pre-computers for those that are listening. And so we had a pink form, and it had copies on it, but it was called pink. And every crime report was a pink. And so you'd have your crime report and you'd hand it in. And you didn't have time to go back to the victim, no matter what the crime was. You're on to the next, on to the next, on to the next. And I used to say they're just numbers. And this isn't a numbers game. It's actually gotten worse since I left. I thought it would get better. And it was this thing of, people aren't numbers. There's somebody behind that. And that the same goes into the medical industry, actually. When you sign in, you're just a number, And I've been meat on the slab in a hospital. And again, you're just a number. And it was this thing is, we're not numbers. There's emotions, there's a heartbeat. And it was a huge deal for me. On the other side of all of that was the police officers had no support. No support. It would be crime after crime after crime. Goodbye, go home. Until they caved. And when they caved, it was, here's a psychologist, here's a psychiatrist, but nothing along the way. Like, you just have to learn how to deal with it. So I did crash and burn. I crashed and burnt, and all signs, there was further signs, all signs took me to California. But I got a year's sabbatical with the British Police Force to bring horse whispering back to the police force as an equine coach. I was before my time. There was no such thing as equine coaching, no such thing to bring it back. Well, as it happened, the sabbatical turned into 2-3 years. And then with it, my marriage, my horse, my home, my career, everything imploded. Every sign was to stay in the States, which I did. I threw myself into horse whispering, and I threw myself into give a voice to the voiceless. I had nothing. I'd lost money. At those days, I wasn't getting paid. I couldn't get back to England, because when you start applying for visas, you can't get back. There was just me. So I threw myself into the language of the horse. And then I always like to be the best I can be, because if you're the best you can be, the best version of yourself, that was the only way I could get heard. I don't have the backing and sponsors or finances. It just had to be truth-based. And so all of this became the nonprofit, to say there's 3 parts to the nonprofit, and the third happens to be coaching for first responders. I say the third part because I've got it in my head like that. But another part was no horse gets left behind. And how that got developed was actually my husband here And Vin would come on the clinics, and they were all with nonprofits. We would do feedlot foals, Mustangs, Premerins, nurse foals, tribal foals. I went everywhere to show that this language was universal, to bring forward all of these awful industries and shed light on them. So people knew what a nurse foal was, and there's thousands of Premerins out there, everything. And then Vin would come on the clinic and he'd say, that foal can't be left behind, Anna. And I'd come back with, but Vin, he's at a rescue. No, he can't be left at the rescue. So we ended up taking a few of them home. And it got to the point where I banned him from coming to the clinic. I said, you can't come. I go all over the place and I don't bring them home. You come and you bring them home. And as much as you love them, there's compartmentalizing. My part played was to gentle. My part played was to raise funds. Mine was to get you out of that awful situation. And now you're okay. And Vin says, no horse gets left behind. So that became part of the nonprofit to state, we are going to provide a place if they've been in our clinics, because I couldn't stand it to think that one of these Mustangs would be gentle our way. And then even if one of my students dies, to go, now they find themselves in the slaughter pipeline. You'll see me, I get very expressive. And even my throat closes there to go, not an option. We need to be able to bring them in, if not place them, keep them. No horse gets left behind was the second part. And then the first part, like I started this webinar, was I traveled to China. I traveled to Mongolia, always on my own, to Morocco, to Mexico, to give a voice to the voiceless. And I've done it for so long, but I want a team. I didn't want to go it alone anymore. I'd like to infiltrate different areas to go, here's a team, and we can gentle and we can change behavior, and we could do the natural hoof care and the saddle fitting. And so we have what's classes reach out to horses trainers. And now I do believe, hand on heart, I think we'll be the first trainers without borders. And that's my dream, is to keep going forward, and Trainers Without Borders comes in to make the difference. And that's a big part of the nonprofit, is to spread that word of, instead of mopping up all these messes, which we're never going to be without work for the fact that horses are being neglected, abused, misplaced, commodities. The list is so long, Carol. I know we're talking about wild horses, but even the ones in performance industry are put into therapeutic riding barns and don't want to be there. They've had their grooms in their career, and people with good heart say they want something to do, so do therapy. They don't want therapy. They want you. They want to retire with you. They want to stay at home with you. They might want to go on a trail with you. They don't want to be misplaced. And so there's where we come in with the Trainers Without Borders, to say, let me interpret what's going on with this horse for you.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. So it's a long answer for you, because it has those three components. Ultimately, the whole thing is equine warrior, to say the equine is a warrior in this instance. And then anybody pursues the call of the horse is an equine warrior. So it gives the whole message to say, there's no reason why any horse needs to be abused anymore. We're so educated and so intelligent. And yet we're failing these horses left, right, and center in so many capacities that for first, second, or third world countries, it's awful to think how we put little value on learning the nature of the horse.
Yeah, and here in the U.S., the adoption program that gives people incentives and then has been abused by people taking and dumping horses at slaughter auctions.
Yeah.
Just, the horses aren't even given a chance. So I find that so disturbing.
It's been so disturbing to see them on clinics where an individual will drop them off on a clinic, even go, well, I chased him in the round pen, but he double-barreled me, and now he's dangerous. He double-barreled because you're chasing him as a predator towards prey. It's so misleading of, why would you do that? And from my standpoint, being a clinician, it's heartbreaking that other clinicians are teaching that. There's that other piece too, to go, if this is not, what's it called? But if this is not your gig, if this is not your knowledge, if you don't have a background in wild horses, stop telling people to chase them and then label them as inappropriately. So that's the piece. Is there's been so many programs, honestly, like I have to believe, Carol, it's good intention. I have to go, the tip trainer program was a good intention, because it's warped from my viewpoint to go, too many people were allowed to do it. Their education wasn't there. And the horses, you see them online of big capital letters, he's got to go. Really? He's got to go? You invited him in, you're letting him down. And so there seems to be a lot of conditions around it to go, I invite them in to turn them over and bring them around. They're wild animals. Don't forget that just because you can touch him doesn't make him not wild. He's got the wild in his heart. Be compassionate towards that. And that's what makes them different. You'll never take the wild out of the horse. They could be the best horse on the planet, but you can't take the wild out of the horse, and you shouldn't want to. And that's the next piece, right? Of why would you get him into your life and look for a home for him and then domesticate him down to the barn when he doesn't want to? It's different if they want to, but if he doesn't want to, stop trying to put a round peg in a square hole and vice versa. So yeah, I see these failed programs. You won't know. When the BLM first organized having ranchers take Mustangs, I was at Monty Roberts in California for my beginning there, and there was a ranch that took a ton of Mustangs. And it was the largest at the time, the largest seizure in the United States history of Mustangs, because he placed them there and get paid to have them, and ultimately was feeding them old straw from all of the thoroughbred race horse barns along the street, and never fed them amply enough. And so there was a huge investigation about the horses dying, and the bodies were there. The bodies just weren't near the street. They were further back. But he'd got interns that had been with us that didn't continue the program, trying to train them. He'd got the excess horses coming in. Such a failed program.
Whoa.
So many holes in it.
Whoa.
A program that could have succeeded. And we could go on, because everybody will have their opinions about that one and the tip and the PCP. There's so many opinions about everything. And I come in from the sense of let's look at the hope. Let's look at the vision that they must have come in with hopefully a good plan. And there are solutions. So this is the other one. Just the other day, Carol, somebody puts on my Facebook page going, well, there's excess horses and blah, blah, blah. And you look at it to go, no, breathe, stop. I've been here 25 years. I'm not saying there's no drought. I haven't seen it. And this is my industry. I haven't seen them starving. Doesn't mean they're not there. I haven't seen them. But I know there's solutions out there. And there's simple solutions. They're not difficult for the herd management areas.
Yes, very true.
And I'm sure you've seen it too. Just yesterday, the guy said the helicopter roundups are the most humane. Interesting. I don't know where you've been, but not where I'm standing. They're not, and they're unnecessary.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, and of course, I would like to see the wild horses stay where they belong, in the wild, in their homes, with their families. We face the reality of a lot of them are not, and you've been working with them and trying to give them the best possible future, which I think is so important, because they are not like domestic horses.
No.
I have 3 of my own, and yes, they are still wild horses, in their hearts. And I think that it's so important to be able to help people to understand that, and help people to understand how best to work with them so that they can have a partnership.
Yeah. That's exactly it. And feeling into it is this huge aspect, is to realize, can we keep them as close to nature as possible? And that would mean, could they live outside versus being in? Can we look at the diet to be as close to possible as nature with the roaming and the movement? And then looking at where does their heart sing? And I think the majority of wild horses that have adjusted and adapted to domestication like the trails. The majority, if I had to pinpoint it, and you look at that to go, yeah, they want out. They don't want to be refined in that arena and contained. They want out and they want to see nature, want to see the world. And so therefore, this is somewhat breed specific. And even if you see the really good movers, one has to think, is that their hope and desire? Now, could you force them into it? Some you can, the majority you can. Horses can be forced into a lot of things, as we know, because they're just and the most forgiving, but it's not necessarily the right thing to do. So it's kind of nice to see, what is it they want to do? Where are they motivated? How can we support them? How can we bring out the best in them and bring them forward? And then you do get some incredible relationships. Children with Mustangs, green people with Mustangs, and you see the gratitude on both ends. And that is incredible. But I wish it was a lot less in as far as keep them out there. And if there's certain situations where they have to come in, well, let's address those, but keep them out there, because I call it concentration camps. Maybe I'm a little dramatic, but I see this as a concentration camp. It's that thing of, it's a dry lot and they're waiting for death.
And there's no shelter. And
no.
All they have to look forward to is mealtime once a day.
Oh, it makes me shudder to think about that. It really does. It reminds me, like I said, of the concentration camps. And so therefore, there's far better solutions. There's far bigger solutions out there. And I tell you, mankind seems to have the smallest memory. And nobody remembers the fact that, what has the horse done for the human? This is another question that I'm constantly getting. What makes the horse different to any other species? Why are we focused in on the horses, and why is the attention there? So number one, we have to focus on something, because otherwise there's the bison and the wolf and there's everything, and we're spreading ourselves too thin. So my focus would be the Mustang and bringing that back to all horses, horsemanship and behavior. But when you I'm going to get off point now, but when we look at what has the horse done for us, they have brought us through battle. They've helped with farming. They are actually recreational and created sanity amongst humans, and they're into healing. That's what makes them so different. They're not just anybody, and I'm in it for everybody. Everybody's equal. Everybody deserves a voice and support. But look at these horses of, let's not be dismissive and forget how much this helped us. So humans seem to have the smallest memory of them all to go, okay, disregard them now. We don't need them anymore. No, remember what they've done for us and how they've served and supported us. And now when we made a promise, 1971 promise, and a legal promise,
yes,
we need to be really enforcing that. So you might know far more about that than me, though.
No. Well, I wanted to ask you about your film, which is going to be airing online on February 15th.
It is. A good friend of mine filmed.
I'm very excited to see it.
I hope so. It was beautiful. It was Dawn's idea to bring it into a movie, and she launched it, and it's wonderful. And she filmed all 7 days of the Wild Horse Gentling Clinic, like a fly on the wall piece. But of course, you have to succinct it down, right? So it would be that to say she brought it into 40 minutes. And her vision, I do believe, is to showcase that we don't need to harm these horses. That this will probably bring it to life a little bit. It was so wonderful. She came on the clinic, and what is extraordinary becomes ordinary. And while it's always magical, that first touch, that first breath, the beautiful eyes, when they change their look from concerned or worried to soft, when they start coming forward to the pen, heartwarming. And she said to me, I've worked with many clinicians throughout my lifetime, but the horses are never at the front within a few days. They're always standing back and never at the front. And our horses, let's say day 4, 5, 6, 7, heads would be through those panels asking to be petted.
Yeah.
And that's when the penny drops, because that is my normal. And the penny drops to go, you're right. I haven't for years seen the one that still has to be roped after 7 days, or the one that goes in the chute. You're right. I'm not seeing the one that says, please don't touch me, or you still have to move his feet. We have them coming forward. And that's really what gets showcased here, would be, here's a dozen horses with a dozen newbies. And these horses are transitioning, and these humans are learning something from scratch. And so bringing two together to say we're working on the first touch and the first halter. I wouldn't say there's substance, because you'd have to do 40 hours and you can't. So it really would be that surface skimming to go, look, everybody's got happy faces. Everybody's trying the best. They're acknowledging they're trying, which the movie would showcase, with a view that we would then later release the 7-day clinic to say, this is the package that you guys can have if this interests you. And it would be my hope that the right people are watching it. That's my hope, is that they watch it and either they have that epiphany, or they look at it honestly and say, oh, wow, there's way more to this. You know, we don't need to use a cattle prod or a stick or this or that. But I developed this thing called water gentling. And for the naked eye, somebody would go, oh, you're bathing a horse. You're not bathing a horse, actually. You're influencing feet, and you're acknowledging the try, and you're advancing a treating. And you could actually create a stop, a block, a side pass, forward draw, a backing up. So you're putting that on the horse. You're teaching them. When we block here, that would be a back. When we do this with body language and the hose, we're coming forward. And then we can put rein up there, so you start with rein, or it's a really fine line, or a thick line, or a fan. And you can see my enthusiasm, because what I'm saying there is, now you're teaching them pressure. Now you're teaching them a big piece. You're showing them movement and vision. So the water gentling, because it's soft and it's fresh in the summer and it's cooling, has a good association with it, and it will help you with proximity. So it's new. I say it's new to me, meaning I brought it out there to go, how do I get to touch these guys without bringing in fear? And look, we can teach them all this from a distance, which they appreciate. And by the time we touch them, they're not going to jump away anymore, right? That first touch, you want it to be the best touch in the world, but sometimes they would bolt. Well, if they've been touched with the hose, they're ready for something to touch them. I can keep the student safe, you know. So it may not even be on the movie, but the point is, there's sections on the movie that show there's so many other ways. There's so many ways to get a dialogue. There's so many ways to check in with yourself, to know that you're influencing with your energy and your movement, that it's a language. And that's the showcase of the movie, is to go, yeah, learn the language.
That's wonderful.
So I'm glad I told you about it. I hope people love it. We did it around the 14th of Feb to make it that Valentine's presents, and putting all the right juju in it to get it out in the world so people can utilize and realize, let's treat them with the respect and honor that they deserve. They're not the lowest form of horse. For me, they're the highest form. They're the masters.
Yes.
They're the masterminds. And so we need to elevate and showcase them.
And people can sign up for the event.
Oh, they can. That's right.
equinewarrior.org, correct?
That's right. Thank you. Thank you for having that. Yes, that's exactly it. And then we ask for a little donation, and it will help. And people can choose the donation. So that's nice and easy. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Well, I really appreciate your coming on my podcast today and talking about this, because it's such an important thing for all horses everywhere.
Yeah. Let me ask you something back, Carol, because you too have been in pursuit of the horses, the wild horses and their whisper. And you're a veteran in this industry by taking the pictures and sitting with them, being with them. And what would you say? Two things, actually, if you don't mind. What keeps you going? Because it's a journey. What keeps you going? And what moves you the most about them?
I think that they let me in. They let me sit there with them. You know, horses are so much faster than I am.
Yeah. Yeah.
I could never chase them, and you know, they could leave at any moment. But the
Yeah.
fact that they let me sit there with them while they're going on with their day, while they're grooming each other, while the foals are nursing, while they're taking a nap, it's just the most incredible privilege. And, you know, they'll often get curious about me, but they always know I'm there. And I just feel like they're letting me into their family for a period of time, which I feel is so special. And the thing that keeps me going is I cannot imagine um, an earth where we don't have wild horses. And if we don't keep working to keep them wild and free, they're going to disappear. And that's just not something I want to conceive of.
Yeah. To keep them alive for the next generation. Exactly. And it's upon us, isn't it? It's right here, right now, where people have to take action and not sit back and go, well, we're okay and our children are okay. We're not. I didn't think in my lifetime there would be such an eradication.
Yes.
And that is a huge part to say, let's not eradicate another species. So absolutely. Yeah, I love it. I love hearing your piece too. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you for having me. I know it's last minute and we did great to get together. Thank you so much, everybody. And I'll see you on my movie, hopefully.
Yes, absolutely.